And yet I do think capitalism is the greatest force for good in the world, and I do talks on that when I talk about conscious capitalism, because people that hate capitalism basically just don't know history very well. They don't know where humanity was 200 years ago. I mean, the facts are clear. 200 years ago, 94% of people alive lived on less than $2 a day, 94%. Illiteracy rates were over 90%. The average lifespan was 30. It was horrible. And it's been capitalism that is lifting humanity out of the dirt and literally creating prosperity. And is it perfect? Of course not. Human beings aren't perfect. It reflects the strengths and weaknesses of humans. So where does it go wrong? I mean, I think it's attacked because primarily people see its motives as wrong. They see nonprofits, they serve the public good. And business is about making money, selfishness, greed. That's kind of what sociopaths do, right? They just care about themselves. But I don't think that's really what motivates business. I think business has this potential for higher purpose, for creating value in the world. I think business is the greatest value creator in the world. But I do think the intellectuals hate it. They have control of the narrative, and it's hard to change that narrative. But I'm doing the best I can to at least get another viewpoint out there.
Well, you have contributed to counter narrative, and you have a personal philosophy of consciousness in
Right.
conscious capitalism. Part of, I think, what at least my understanding of conscious capitalism, which you can either, you can disabuse me of if I'm wrong, is this commitment to a deeper purpose. And that's evident, in a lot of what you've done with Whole Foods. But let's talk about this idea of a deeper purpose. What does that have to do with making a profit? A hard-nosed business person might say, conscious whatever, you got to make money.
Well, of course you do have to make money or you'll die. But I think a better way to understand it is through think about this for a second. As Ed Freeman, the founder of stakeholder theory, says, so my body has to produce red blood cells or I'll die. And if I stop producing red blood cells, I will not stay alive very long. It doesn't therefore logically follow that just because I must produce red blood cells that is the purpose of my life, to produce red blood cells. It is demonstrably not the purpose of my life. Mm-hmm. And similarly, business has to make money or it'll die. It can't renew itself. It can't replace its equipment. It'll be outcompeted in the marketplace and it will die. But just because it must make profit does not logically follow. Therefore, that's why it exists. And most of the businesses that you most admire, yes, they have in it, but the narrative is controlled by the people that hate business, and they're the ones that put it out there consistently. But yet, businesses that you most admire are like, what's Google? Does Google have a higher purpose? Yeah, to collect the world's information and make it universally accessible. And that's exactly what they've done. And think how much Google has changed the world in the last 20 years. It's amazing. Amazon, it has a higher purpose to be the Earth's most customer-centric organization. And think how Amazon's changed the world and how they've made things much more readily available to people. Whole Foods is to nourish people on the planet. So businesses have this higher purpose, and yes, they must make money. And so I think that's the single biggest misunderstanding. And I have known hundreds of entrepreneurs in my lifetime. Are some of them just in it for the money? Yes, they are. I mean, doctors, do they have a higher purpose? Of course they do. Their higher purpose is to heal people. Are some doctors in it for the money? Yes, but that doesn't mean that's what medicine is all about, making money. Teachers educate, architects design things, engineers construct things. They all refer back to some type of value creation that they're doing to make the world a little bit better place. Business is the greatest value creator. And if you want to seek the higher purpose of business, ask what the value creation is. It doesn't mean there are not bad actors in business. There are greedy, selfish people. And that's not different than the society as a whole. I guarantee you there's some selfish, greedy people in here that are not business people.
Well, and so, we started off with this, with this fun question about Jeff Bezos, and I appreciate you indulging me. But you've now had a merger, and you spent your life building this wonderful company that has aesthetic dimension. It's nourishing. You've created through some of your animal practices some of the highest standards for the treatment of animals. The part of your higher purpose, I'm sure, is infuses in that. Do you have concerns now with in the post-Amazon era that the deeper purpose of Whole Foods could be lost?
That was the biggest thing we had to square away with Amazon when we were courting each other. I really think the best way to understand a merger between large companies, it's kind of like a marriage. And honestly, people laugh about this. The media is very cynical, but when we flew a team up to meet with the Amazon team, we had the most amazing. When you fall in love, at some point, you will have the conversation. You may stay up all night, but there will be a meeting of souls, and then you fall in love. That happened the very first time we got together with Jeff and his team. We talked for 4 hours, and it's like the Whole Foods team went to this restaurant afterwards, and we looked at each other and said, those guys are frigging amazing. They weren't the corporate types that I thought they were going to be. They were very down to earth. They were extremely intelligent. We spent 4 hours talking about all the things we could do together. And we were looking at each other, and then it was like, man, I'd love to be part of Amazon. And then they said, somebody said, they looked at us and said, do you think they liked us too? It turned out they did. Because 4 days later, they sent a whole team of Amazon people down to further continue the conversation disguised as Boston Consulting Group consultants. Jeff Bezos was not in that group. I think he'd be recognizable. But we sent a team down, and we had another amazing conversation. Literally, merely like 40 days after we had the first date, we were engaged. It was that quick. And one of the things we had to discuss was the purpose. And I remember before I will tell you a little story. So price had been worked out, everything was being agreed, and I told my board of directors, I said, I got to go meet with Jeff one-on-one. I've got to make sure the whole purpose thing is squared away. I don't want this, and I had the investment bankers trying to stop it. They told the board, do not let him go. He could screw this deal. We're going to get sued if this deal doesn't go through. And I told the board, I said, well, I'm going. You can fire me if you want to. I don't think that'll be good for the merger. And I met with Jeff. We had this great talk about purpose. And no, Amazon does not want to, they're smart people. They don't want to mess with Whole Foods. They want to help us get better. They're not trying to take us over and destroy us. They're not the Borg in Star Trek metaphor trying to assimilate us, and resistance is futile. It's a marriage. And my joke on the marriage thing, or the metaphor, is like I'm the father of Whole Foods, right? And they're like my daughter. And I married my daughter off literally to the richest man in the world. I just came along, to make sure, it doesn't beat her. That'll probably show up somewhere. But truthfully, Amazon has been a great partner for Whole Foods. They're making us better. Our sales are up. The technology that's going to come our way and is coming our way is going to be incredible. There's no better partner Whole Foods could have found. I'm just thrilled. I feel really, really good about it.
Well, as it happens, most of the people sitting in this audience are both entrepreneurial in their orientation. They really are into innovation. They're really into entrepreneurship. And yet, the sort of binding force of Future Frontiers folks is consciousness. And so I think conscious capitalism in some sense lands well with this enterprising bunch. So, and some of the folks in the room who are going to be tomorrow's conscious capitalists and conscious entrepreneurs are going to want to know what sort of qualities helps make a John Mackey. Or even, let's just talk about people you admire in the space, so you don't have to brag on yourself. What are some of the qualities you admire in other conscious capitalists and that people can emulate?
Well, I will do a little commercial that I'm working on another book now. title's not quite. Working title is Love and Purpose, the 12 Virtues of the Conscious Leader. And so I admire people that have a strong sense of purpose, people that are caring, loving human beings, people that have high integrity, people that seek win-win-win solutions. Basically, people who are courageous, are creative, innovative. The classic entrepreneurial traits: add heart to it, add caring, add idealism to it, and you've got kind of the conscious capitalists and the people I most admire in the world.
And it is possible to reconcile the hard-nosed business types who have to be concerned with profit, with caring, with respect, with all of those things you admire with heart.
Well, I think that's kind of a myth. I know people, it's because of the metaphors people use to think about business that I think are wrong. If you're going to change the narrative about business, you have to change the metaphors that people use to construct a narrative. So some of the metaphors that are common are war metaphors, right? Think of the language that's used in business, It's hyper competition. You have to kill them. You have to roll over them, destroy the competitors. You got to outflank them. We're going to have staff meetings. Let's go into the war room. So there's this whole perspective that we're at war here. And you know what? You're at war. There's not a lot of place in war for love. Okay? You do that at home. You check your when you come into this office, you're going to war. And it's like, okay, that's not a great metaphor for the kind of world we want to construct. What's another metaphor? Sports metaphors. In sports metaphors, there's not win-win-win. There's win and lose. We're the winners. They're the losers. We're going to We're going to crush those guys. We're going to be the champions. We are the champions. And the whole game type of thinking comes into it. That's better than war metaphors.
But it's still zero sum.
It's still zero sum. It's not really what business is about. Business is about creating lots of winners and exponentially multiplying progress. Third type of metaphor primarily used are Darwinian metaphors. Survival of the fittest. This is kill or be killed. It's a jungle out there. Only the paranoid survive. Really, only the paranoid survives. Again, if those are the metaphors that we use to think about business, we're constructing a narrative where there can't be any love. That'll be something that, keep it in the corporate closet, okay? Don't let it out, because so this hard-nosed business person falls into that narrative that you got to be tough or you're going to get crushed. And I do think that the part of the awakening of consciousness in business is bringing in that, I won't get into gender, but it's bringing in more heart energy, and but combining it, synthesizing it with strength. Love is not weak. Love is strong. Show me a parent or a mother protecting their child, and I'll show you strength. So love is not. We have to reject that metaphor that says you got to be tough, hard-nosed business person, and that means you can't be caring. No, I reject that. In fact, I've spent 40 years proving it's not true.
It's funny, we're talking about that feminine mama bear energy is ascendant, and I love it. When we first met, and I was able to come into your office, which was a real treat for me, we got to talking. Mm-hmm. And there's another kind of metaphor that's in business, that is the machine metaphor.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things we touched on is that you described a company as being more like an organism,
right,
like a living thing, or a set of living things that comprises
an ecological system. An ecological is a better metaphor. We need new metaphors. That's a better one.
Yeah. So if you can talk about that. Well, first, why does the machine metaphor fail? Why do you prefer the ecosystem metaphor?
Because humans aren't machines. I mean, we are these amazing, caring. We're relationship oriented, we're family oriented, we're tribal oriented. We're about connection. Machines aren't. They don't do justice to what human beings are. And when you start thinking in terms of machines, you start to dehumanize people. So I don't think it's a good metaphor. You're going to use these metaphors a little bit, but it shouldn't dominate the narrative. And they dominate right now. Machines would have been the next one I attacked. If I had enough time, I was going through all the negative metaphors. Machines were fourth up.
Well, that's funny because I remember that, and the machine metaphor extends to the economy too, and that is problematic.
Yeah.
The economy overheats, for example.
The economy is a big machine. It's really not a
prime the
machine.
pump
It's
and
not
all
a
this
machine.
stuff.
That's misled economics for many, many decades now.
So the organism or the biological metaphor, the ecosystem metaphor, goes all the way down to the cellular unit of the human being.
It absolutely does. And economics are much better understood with ecological metaphors or biological metaphors or community metaphors than they are being understood as a giant machine that these technocrats can manage, which they can't.
Yeah.
It's reonomics, not economics. No money.
So a lot of the folks who are here are really interested in the future. They're not afraid of it. They're staring into the headwinds of the status quo, and they're trying to do interesting and innovative things. That's why they come here. What would you say to folks who are embarking on this journey to do something against, to stand up against naysayers or the status quo bias? What would you say?
The first thing I'd say is that there has never been a time in the entire history of humanity that it was better to be alive than right now. So, I will give you can have the entire history of humanity, and I will take right now. You tell me a better time. There never was a better time. Does that mean it's perfect? Of course not. Does that mean we have problems? We have tons of problems. Only we had worse problems in the past. And so when I read articles about the millennial generation that doesn't want to reproduce, or there are suicide rates up, it's like, that's just because the narrative has become so negative and pessimistic. It's so not historically grounded in any type of context. So I'm an incredible optimist. I mean, I wish I was as young as most of the people in this room, because I can't wait to see what's going to happen. It's going to be incredible. The innovations, humanity is, I'm not predicting utopia, because human nature has to evolve. We have to become more conscious, but I do think we're becoming more conscious. I think people are far more conscious today than they were 50 years ago when I was younger. So humanity is evolving not just technologically, it's evolving spiritually, and it's evolving culturally. So I would say optimism is very important. Don't let those pessimistic narratives get you down. But here's the thing. I will tell you, the world, when I was young, your age, the world was completely screwed up. Far more screwed up than it is today. And I blamed my parents. Because, I mean, must have been their fault. But, you know, as I got older, I realized, God, my parents they grew up in the Depression. Then when they were 21 years old, they had to go into World War II. And they never had any money. And all they got out, they just wanted to go in the suburbs and plant a garden and raise their kids in safe neighborhoods and just retreat from it all, because that was what their dominant consciousness was. And that had its own set of problems. So my generation has solved a lot of problems, which we don't get credit for. Mostly boomers are getting blamed for shit. But we solved a lot of problems. But there are also a lot of other problems that we didn't solve and we're not going to solve. That's your mission, should you decide to accept it. Seriously. That's what you're called to do. You're called to innovate in new ways that I can't even imagine. I was in the green room talking to people, and they were talking about cryptocurrencies and talking about fuel cells, and it's like, this is pretty cool stuff. And so there's going to be these amazing innovations, and it will be entrepreneurs like the people in this room, not just business entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs of all kinds, who are basically creative people who are going to innovate and create solutions to problems that I can't even imagine. Solutions I can't even imagine. One of the questions I get asked the most by journalists is, what do you think the world's going to be like in 20 years? And it's like, okay, let's do a little exercise. Let's go back 20 years ago. 20 years ago, nobody had a smartphone. There was no, Google had just been created. There was no Facebook, no smartphones, no iPods. Nobody had Airbnb. There was no Tesla, there's no Uber. The world was completely different. And anybody that tried to predict what it would be like 20 years from now was completely wrong. So I don't ever play that prediction game. It's because innovation emerges in unexpected ways. And then there are all these adjacent possibilities. I mean, the internet got invented, then you had the smartphone, and then things like Uber become possible. They weren't possible before you had that type of certain technological evolution. And Amazon becomes possible, and you have all the, Facebook becomes possible, and you get these whole new generation of tech titans, which now everybody's scared of. They're all going to take over. However, there's possibly people in this room that are going to do these amazing new innovations that will make Amazon or Google or somebody else irrelevant, or begin to fall back.
We're counting on it.
Yes. Well, then who knows? They'll become the new enemy because they'll become powerful and rich and successful. So we'll always have that with us.
Well, now that reminds me, this question of power. Around this, at least on this jurisdiction, there are invisible sets of rules and protocols by which we have to live and work and operate in order to do good things, but sometimes those rules and protocols work at odds with the creative spirit, right? We don't all agree on which set of rules or laws or protocols we should operate in, but we have them, they're here. So let's play a little game. I'm going to hand you a magic wand, okay?
Cool, I always wanted to be Harry Potter.
Yeah. And you have suddenly the power with this magic wand to change one rule, one law to make the world a better place. What would it be?
To change one law in the United States, there's not a law across the world.
Yeah. Might not have anything to do with business. Might have.
Well, I'll tell you it's not really changing the law, but I can tell you the one thing I would change. I'm very disturbed, of course, by the tribalization. I'm very disturbed about going into small identity clusters. Very disturbed about a loss of freedom of speech. So if there's one thing I could change, I know we have to have ideas that clash with each other because it's through the clash of ideas that we come up with better solutions. So when we get conversations shut down, then we lose an opportunity to create higher syntheses. So that's the one thing I would change. I would continue to allow free minds, free people, free thinking, free speech. Those are important, and those have been part of the whole American ethos, and I'm worried that's disappearing. So
I wanted to tell you a quick story, and this isn't about me. This is about John, but I just have to tell you that this man lives it. I had an opportunity in an email exchange. I mean, this is a person who not only believes in expression and the clash of ideas, but lives it. Because he let me have a big, long email argument with him over the course of 3 days. And, this is a person whose opportunity costs are so big in terms of his responsibilities, but took the time and takes the time to engage with people. You live that, and I really
some
appreciate
people, Max. You're worth engaging with. You're a very smart guy, and you have good ideas, and it was fun. It was fun having a good debate with a really intelligent guy, so I enjoyed it. We never did come to an agreement on it, but we planted some seeds.
Yeah, and he came here anyway, so it's a good thing. So, you started the first Whole Foods right here in Austin. And you can walk in, the mothership is in some iteration still here. You've probably all been to it, or at least, it's been built upon or whatever, but that store back in 1980 that you started with a little bit of capital from some friends and family, despite the flood that Theta told you about, and you built it into something that we have all probably in this room enjoyed to some extent or the other.
A lot of people build Whole Foods.
Yeah.
And one of the things I always try to emphasize is the CEO founder gets way too much credit and way too much blame. It's always, anything that's really great done in the world is done by people cooperating together. And I certainly played a part in Whole Foods' success, but I just want to say that it's been the dream of thousands and thousands of people. So,
How many of you here are not from Austin visiting? So, what would you say to these folks about the little bit of? Is there any Austin DNA in Whole Foods still?
yeah, why do you think Austin's grown so much in the last No, Whole Foods has got a lot of Austin DNA in it. A lot of the values, the culture, but we allow each of these different regions to have their own uniqueness as well. We've not tried to make it monolithic. The Bay Area and San Francisco Bay Area is very different than Boston. It's very different than Florida. Very different than Boulder, Colorado, Los Angeles. They're all unique and they're all special, but there is a injection of Austin DNA and values definitely in it for sure.
John Mackey, thank you so much for coming out and spending time with us.
Please give this